Hey, can I read you a story? It's going to take about 5 minutes. So if you got 5 minutes, hang in there. It says, as it starts, as she stood in front of her 5th grade class on the very first day of school, she told the children an untruth, a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her students and said that she loved them all the same. However, that was impossible because there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed that he did not play well with the other children, that his clothes were messy, and that he constantly needed a bath. In addition, Teddy could be unpleasant. It got to the point where Mrs. Thompson would actually take pride in marking his papers with a broad red pen, marking an X or a big F on the top of his papers. At the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, she was required to review each child's past records and put Teddy's off till the very end. However, when she reviewed his file, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's 1st grade teacher, now he's in 5th grade, his 1st grade teacher wrote, Teddy is a bright child, has a really good laugh, he does his work neatly and has good manners. He is a joy to be around. His 2nd grade teacher wrote, Teddy is an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he is troubled because his mother has terminal illness, and life at home must be a struggle. His 3rd grade teacher wrote, his mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him, and some steps should be taken. Teddy's 4th grade teacher wrote, Teddy's withdrawn and doesn't show much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends and sometimes sleeps in class. By now, Mrs. Thompson realized the problem, and she was ashamed of herself. She even felt worse when her students brought her Christmas presents wrapped in beautiful ribbons and bright paper, except for Teddy's. He wrapped his in clumsy, heavy brown paper that he got from the grocery store. Mrs. Thompson took the pains to open it up in the middle of the other presents. Some of the children laughed when they found a rhinestone bracelet with some stones missing and a bottle that was a quarter full of perfume. But she stifled the children's laughter when she explained how pretty the bracelet was and putting it on and dabbing some of the perfume on her wrist. Teddy Stoddard stayed after school that day just long enough to say, Mrs. Thompson, today you smelled just like my mother used to. After the children left, she cried for at least an hour. Then that very next day, she quit teaching. Writing, reading, arithmetic. She began to teach children. Mrs. Stoddard paid attention, especially to Teddy. As she worked with him, his mind seemed to come alive. The more she engaged him and encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in her class. And despite her lie that she would love all the children the same, Teddy became her teacher's favorite, like the teacher's pet. A year later, she found a note underneath her door from Teddy telling her that she was still the best teacher he ever had in her whole life. 6 years went by, and she got another note from Teddy that wrote that he had finished high school, 3rd in his class, and she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 4 years later after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, he stayed in school and stuck it out and would soon graduate from college with the highest of honors. Mrs. Thompson said he said, Mrs. Thompson, you're the best teacher I ever had in my whole life. Then 4 more years passed, and yet another letter came. This time he explained that he got his bachelor's degree and decided to go a little further. The letter explained that she was still the best teacher and favorite teacher he ever had in his whole life, but now his name was a little longer. The letter was signed Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. The story does not end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said that he met this girl and was going to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple years ago and was wondering if Mrs. Thompson would agree to sit at the wedding in the place that usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course, Mrs. Thompson did. And guess what? She wore the bracelet that had the several rhinestones missing. Moreover, she actually wore the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing on their last Christmas. They hugged each other, and Dr. Stoddard whispered in Mrs. Thompson's ear, "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, for believing in me so much and making me feel important and showing me that I could make a difference." Mrs. Thompson, with tears in her eyes, whispered back, she said, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You were the one who taught me I could make a difference. I didn't know how to tell you, but you did." For those of you who don't know, Teddy Stoddard is the doctor at Iowa Methodist Hospital in Des Moines, Iowa, and has the Stoddard Cancer Center. So we can make a difference in people's lives. You want to work on being like Mrs. Thompson, who made a difference in one person's life. That's what it's about, making a difference in people's lives. I hope you have a great week. See you next week.